All right, guys, we just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2024 preview and prediction for the Texas A&M Aggies. Newly revamped coaching staff after they paid Jimbo Fisher nearly $80 million to just sit on the couch. Mike Elko returns to the A&M 16-9 in 2 seasons at Duke. Obviously, I think this was the correct A-plus hire. He was able to do some nice things on the staff, bringing in Colin Klein, spent his entire life at Kansas State as a player and a coach, moves on to bigger and better things. Jay Bateman, linebacking coach at Florida the last couple seasons, will come over and man that defense. They beat 0 teams with winning records last season. Nick, I kind of just want to get your opinion on the firing of Jimbo, pulling the trigger and giving him that massive buyout after 6 seasons of no double-digit wins.
Jimbo kind of felt like a dead man walking for a very long time here. A&M was bringing in incredible talent top to bottom. They had the top class at one point. We're bringing in incredible players who just seemed to be guys that were, mercenaries, for lack of a better word, that were just there to collect a paycheck and really didn't seem to fit together as a team and really motivated. Jimbo had a tough time motivating him. He got a few signature wins here and there, right? Beat Alabama at home in 2022. That was a pretty serious win for this program. Did some other things. Or in 2021, that is, beg your pardon. But, won against Alabama at home. That was a huge win for the program. Jimbo, was a splashy hire. You don't really see moves like that in college football where guys leave top-tier programs to move laterally to another top-tier program when he left from Florida State. It just never worked out. There was high expectations, maybe too high of an expectations based off that contract. Never worked out, and now Jimbo receives an $80 million check, basically, to go sit at home and watch games on TV. Was it the right move? Yeah, I think so. I think things were just not going to get better at this point in time. The fan base had revolted. That's an alumni base with huge pockets, a lot of money to go around, so they don't mind putting money up here. Elko coached under Fisher, was a defensive coordinator at A&M, was a really good defensive coach for that program, and turned Duke, who really were a lifeless program for a very long time, just a middle of the bottom tier ACC program that really were doing nothing, and got them to 16-9 in 2 seasons, solid numbers there. Bringing Klein in, Bateman in, 2 really solid ads. I think this is a fantastic start to the Mike Elko tenure down there in College Station. But they want to win national championships. A&M wants to compete. They've never really competed for a national championship at this point in time. They want to go out and do that. Is Elko going to be the guy to do it? Only time will tell.
Looking at the Aggies offense, obviously this wasn't that bad of a unit last year, 25th in scoring. The passing attack was quite sound despite Connor Wigman going down early in the year. Max Johnson was hit or miss at times, but the offense really never seemed to be too stagnant under him, despite him not being all that great of a passer in my opinion. Wigman, of course, a guy who is a quick decision maker, is smart with the ball, knew when to rip it loose. Has a smooth arm from his baseball days. Really showcased nice ball placement in his appearances. Does a good job of his feet. Sets before he throws. Good arm. Showcase some nice touch and precision. Hasn't shown elite strength by any means though. Pocket awareness. It's pretty sound. Has a good sense of rushers. Needs to keep improving his timing and rhythm. And the reason why he hasn't really did that yet is because he only has 9 games under his belt in 2 years, following an injury. In the freshman year, he didn't play all that much as a former 5-star. So not a lot of experience here for a third-year player, Nick. Jalen Henderson, I know he suffered I think it was him that suffered a devastating injury in the bowl game. You also have Marcel Reed as well on this roster. So you have some nice solid options, but Wigman's going to be the man here. And again, the experience factor is a little iffy for me. Should get better with time. What are your thoughts on a guy who hasn't played a whole lot and we wish we'd have more on him?
Wegman's a really exciting prospect, but like you said, just has not played enough. Max Johnson, I thought, was a below-average quarterback when he took over, really sort of hampered a team that just wasn't phenomenal on offense last year. Wegman will come back in and look to be that guy for this team. I think he has the opportunity to do so. This offense did score 33 points per game last year, which was a decent number, but they were just, an average SEC offense across the board. Wegman last year, 68.9. Completion percentage, 979 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks in the 4 games. So there's your glimpse right there, right? 8 touchdowns, 2 picks, nearly 1,000 yards across 4 games. Good numbers early on. That injury was devastating for him and this offense. Got a full year of practice, but the injuries have not been a single issue for 1 year. He had injury issues in the past as well in earlier seasons in his career. So can he stay fully healthy? That's going to be the key to whether this Texas A&M team, gets 8, 9, 10 wins. He's got to be fully healthy all year.
Wigman certainly has a receiving core I think is incredibly underrated. Jedi Walker had a great stretch to end the season, showcasing soft hands, good route runner at 6'4", 210, nice catch radius, did have 7 drops, though he's going to be the X here. Noah Thomas, a 6'6", 200, has the skills that should lead to a production increase, having length and good speed. Moose Muhammad, another guy with some skills that should allow him to be a good asset in the slot. Made plenty of circus catches, and overall is just a fluid, athletic player. Mike Elko didn't touch the ball at all till the bowl game. Has great vertical speed and ball skills. Jabri Barber was a good slot for Troy. He really thrived with speed after the catch. He had exactly 1,000 yards last year. Well, really 999, but who cares? Cyrus Allen played a lot of outside wide receiver and shook a 10 for the X despite being 177 pounds. He was really good with balance and catch radius at LA Tech. Did struggle with drops and ball security overall. This is a pretty impressive room they have here, Nick. I love the additions in the transfer portal. They have a good variety of skill, size, and speed, and I certainly think if Wigman can stay healthy, this is a part of the unit that could certainly impress, and I don't think a lot of people are going to talk about the receiving corps for A&M this year, but I'm pretty happy with this unit if I'm an A&M fan.
I like this wide receiver room. I think it's a solid room. I think Walker's a really good guy. Your top returning receiver, 590 yards, receiving 16.9 yards per grab, 2 scores. Noah Thomas, 359, 12.4 yards per grab, and 5 touchdowns. A really nice red zone threat there that they returned. Solid numbers. Moose Muhammad, this is a guy I'm excited about. Is this the year he finally breaks out? We've been saying, the potential is there with him, a really high upside player. I thought he was going to have a better season than he did last year. I think he can have a better season this year. I think he can really break out at this point in time. 345, 12.8, and 2 scores for Moose Muhammad last year. I like that trio right there. I think they made some nice work in the portal, adding some different guys in there who could really be solid players. And then Muhammad in the slot, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think it's a really good wide receiver room. This is a very underrated wide receiver room with some seriously talented players.
I think something else that's not talked about enough with the Aggies is for them to be able to return the entire running back room under this new staff, Colin Klein and Elko getting to work. These guys probably could have been plucked and played elsewhere. Ruben Owens, remember he was a 5-star recruit entering his second year. Athletic frame, quick-footed runner with some good open field speed. Great stop-start ability. Covers good ground on his moves, 5'11", 190. Le'Veon Moss showed some impressive acceleration. Pretty decisive runner. Good vision, like his cutting abilities. He can also lower his pads with no problem. Amari Daniels was an efficient player versus worser defenses, but versus tougher ones was really just a short yard bruiser. Was able to pick up a couple of yards at times. And then E.J. Smith, of course, Emmitt Smith's son, arrives from Stanford. He, in the past, has shown explosiveness. He can catch the ball out wide if need be. I wonder what his role will be for him. Pretty deep 4-man room here for the Aggies, Nick. And again, just for them to be able to return these guys and then add another notable name is very impressive for this staff to be able to accomplish.
Nearly 1,500 yards of returning production here with solid guys. Amari Daniels, 532 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry, 6 scores for him. Really solid numbers. Moss, a really good player as well. In 9 games, 484 yards, 5 yards per carry, 5 scores for him. Ruben Owens, the highly rated player out of high school, was originally committed to Louisville. Then a coaching change led him to flip his commitment to go down to A&M, stays in the state of Texas. A really incredible 5-star back. Didn't get as many touches last year as he would maybe hope, but a really solid player, 385 yards, 3.8 yards per touch, and 3 touchdowns for him. Each of them also have a couple grabs out of the backfield, about 10 to 15 each for them, so they could be involved in that as well. Really solid running back room, certainly the lifeblood of this offense. Really good players here. Really excited to see what they can do as they all come back together.
When people ask analysts, what went wrong for Texas A&M, and they don't respond with the offensive line struggles under Steve Adazio, I don't really consider you really qualified to talk about the Aggies, because this is really where the blunder was. They struggled significantly. They had great talent and size. Could never get this group in sync. Trey Zunn at left tackle, 6'6", 315, a strong, powerful player, provides a good drive in the run game. Still allows lots of pressure. Isn't allowing many sacks, though. Ruben Fathery, role is undefined, as he was a pretty stout performer in 2022 at right tackle. Quickly got hurt on the left side. He, played left guard in the bowl game, though. 6'8", 315. Mark Naboo, a 6'4", 325, has played a good bit. Certainly has a size advantage, but struggled at left guard last season. He and Cam Dewberry, 6'4", 330, are going to battle for the center spot, as Bryce Foster is unexpectedly no longer with the team. Chase Vasantis struggled significantly at right tackle as a true freshman in his first few games in the SEC. He was incredibly tough, though, at the end of the season. Big body at 6'6", 320. Lots of size for Adam Cushing, who was the offensive line coach at Duke, a unit that never was really all great themselves. A lot more upside here, though. Certainly expect them to showcase respectable improvements. Of course, Graham Barton, a guy for Duke, who was very versatile, was drafted in the first round. Again, Nick, the offensive line progression was horrendous. I really thought that a couple of seasons ago, I remember predicting them to have one of the top offensive lines for 2023. I think that was back in 21, because I thought they would improve to that degree, and they never did. They didn't improve at all. They were just awful, and I thought last season wasn't that bad for them, but the progression was just ugly, and that's the biggest blunder here for A&M.
Didn't really work out at all in the Jimbo Fisher era. They were unable to figure out the offensive line woes, and it really hurt them. They brought in some seriously high-level recruits that didn't work out at all. It's just been a big miss for this unit at all times here. The offensive line was just poor. They have some solid players here like Chase Bisonte. What is he going to look like in year two as a true sophomore? Really solid player at right tackle. Some other players, Mark Narber is a really big center there, a really solid player that got some solid reps as a younger player. Ruben Fartherweather, is he going to be moved around a little bit? Trey Zune, what is he going to look like at left tackle? This is a unit that has to continue to improve because they've not really improved at all. They need to develop here under Mike Elko. Can he build in the trenches and get it working? Because in the SEC, you got to win the battle in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and A&M has lost the offensive battle in the trenches for the last couple of years.
The guy they had from Kansas, one of the only loan additions they picked up front, Armaj Reed Adams from Kansas, 6'5", 325. So again, the size is just tremendous. Got to be able to produce. So in terms of progression, verdict for me on the Aggies offense, it's an interesting bunch with some pretty good versatility and supporting cast with an ex-5-star QB that only has a couple of games under his belt. Colin Klein should showcase some nice creativity with all the weapons at his disposal, while again this offensive line continues to develop. Offense put up 30 per game in SEC play with Max Johnson under center, so I think the ceiling is pretty high here. And obviously they did run up the numbers a good bit. They're playing from behind against Miami, against the FBS, group of 5 teams that is. They were able to run it up on them and whatnot. But they weren't always poor in conference play. They certainly showcased some nice flashes. So I think the ceiling is pretty solid for this offense. Defensive side of the ball, obviously Elko's specialty. Added 14 guys in the portal, lost 8. Really depleted a defensive line here. They returned 4 starters. The defense was the definition of inconsistent for them. They lose 2 of their top 3 tacklers. Scheme didn't change. This should be clockwork for Elko, you'd think, right? They look at a guy, Nick Scorchon, they pick up from Purdue. He was one of the nation's best pass rushers last season. Pretty loose and flexible for his size. At 6'4", 280. Has some nice shake to his game. Really allows him to set up inside moves. Good length and closing ability. I love the spin move he possesses. If he does it with explosion, you look at defensive tackle Shamar Turner, violent hands, long arms, a high effort player, good burst, impressive, match of feet and strength to win at the point of attack at 6'4", 300. You look at the rest of this unit, lots of talent departs. They still return some good ones as well, though. Off the edge, Shamar Stewart will provide nice depth. Just hasn't showcased much production. Cassius Howell was an elite edge rusher for Bowling Green in the MAC, only 6'4", 235, though. Malik Sile hasn't done much, but got some notable experience this past year. Nye White, an ex-top 50 recruit, another player that hasn't provided much either. Good pass rushing group in terms of upside. Joining Turner on the interior D line is Albert Regas, 6'2", 325, who proved to be a steady run stopper. Will be the nose guard for him. Will battle with Gabriel Brownlee Dindley, one of the high-end recruits they landed in the class of 2022. Rodas Johnson, a nice add from Wisconsin. Has good versatility at 295 pounds. I think he's a good run stopper in his own right. And, of course, you can't not mention DJ Hicks, the number 1 ranked defensive tackle in last year's class. Player of great strength and juice inside. 290-pounder who has legit violence in his hands. This is still a really good defensive line here, Nick. The theme continues to be true, though, in the trenches. They have elite talent, where they just seem to be throwing all kinds of money around, especially in that 22 class. None of them really developed, and very few remain from there. Even though they were 14th against the run, you certainly didn't see them develop into, a Los Angeles Rams type of defensive line by any means.
This unit was good against the run. This defensive, first part of this defensive line, right, 108 yards per game against the run. That's a solid number, but like you said, with the high-end talent they brought in, you really expected more, and you just didn't get it with this A&M team. And that's another lasting legacy of the Jimbo Fisher era, right? You tried to beef up the trenches, and you just did not figure it out. You brought guys in, whatever reason, it did not work out. Tough look, certainly, but they kind of transition here with Elko, who's going to try and hopefully coach and figure this out for this first part of this defense. Shamar Turner is a good player to return, 33 total tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks for him. Good numbers there. I think DJ Hicks, a really exciting player, obviously a high-level recruit, 13 total tackles for him, plus 2 tackles for loss in limited appearance. Malik Cilia, 14 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss as well. Shamir Stewart, 11 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him as well. So some nice players here who can step in and figure things out. This is a unit that has to improve. They have to get more tackles for loss, got to get in the backfield. They need to replace a lot from their linebackers that they lost and to the portal in the NFL draft. So they're going to have to try and figure out a way to get good production in this front part of this defense, get after the quarterback, and get some sacks.
Yeah, 99 tackles for loss last year is a really good number. The 42 sacks as well. But I think a good example of just not living up to the expectation on a consistent basis, they held Alabama to 23 rushing yards in a loss. They played Tennessee the next week, and I was like, they're going to dominate the Tennessee rushing attack. pure opposite. They allowed 232 yards in a 7-point loss. They only allowed 150 yards over that mark twice, that Tennessee game and then LSU late in the year, 154. For the most part, again, it was an elite run defense, even though they were incredibly poor in 2022. So just kind of a tale that should have been much brighter for A&M. And Edgar and Cooper obviously is going to be a big loss for them in the middle. Teron York, he was expected to get, go as a true freshman last year. He was exceptional for them. Rarely missed tackles, was a great run defender, emerged as a big-time leader late in the year as a signal caller. Scooby Williams arrives from Florida, really struggled, so not ideally the guy they want to insert into the lineup. They pick up Alex Howard from Youngstown State, who was great. Should bring some valuable experience, but a big jump in competition. Chance Johnson was a 3-star in last year's cycle. Linebacker's a big area of worry for me. Obviously, they have a great D-line front, so won't exactly get burned. But having two standouts on the field is unlikely. York's going to have to fill in that role Cooper had, where he had, 17 and a half tackles for loss. I mean, this is a tremendous player that departs. Some big shoes to fill, Nick. Do you think he can do it all, though? They're going to need some more help for this run defense to take those strides.
The loss of Cooper is a really big loss. York is a good player and had a great, start to his career down there in College Station. 74 total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. But he can't do it all by himself. I think they did bring, Scooby Williams is an interesting ad, but is he going to be able to live up to the expectations that they have down there for him in College Station? I don't think so. They also have a younger Shantez Johnson. Is he going to look okay at wide linebacker as a rotational piece? Martell Harris Jr., is he going to be able to figure it out? This is a room that I think is a little weak here on this linebacking room. Alex Howard, is he going to be able to jump up? But obviously Youngstown State to, playing SEC ball, that's a very tough move. Is Howard going to be able to figure it out? I'm a little bit worried about the depth of this unit, but York is a very exciting player. Certainly looks good in the film. If you watch it, he stands out. Very talented player. They return.
You look now at the secondary unit that certainly had some struggles, week 2 against Miami. They got burned late in the year. They weren't all that polished. But for the most part, they played very well. They were good against Tennessee. Opponents that were weaker never were able to expose them one bit. So this is certainly a good secondary. They returned Tyreek Chappelle at corner. Quick twitched, good run defender. A good closing speed, versatility is. You have to really build off a strong freshman season. Hasn't exactly molded into an elite player, but he has 3 years of starting under his belt. Also is capable of playing in the slot. Josh DeBerry wasn't very good from Boston College. I thought he'd be a big impact transfer for them. Obviously, remember he got picked on a good bit against Jermaine Burton. Tony Grimes was hurt. Both those guys are now gone. Javon Thomas wasn't all that good as a true freshman. He'll be in the mix to start opposite of Chappelle. Dees Ricks, a redshirt freshman from Bama, was a high-end recruit. Will Lee was quite good overall for Kansas State. Just wasn't as consistent. He was benched mid-part of the year before being brought back in and playing quite solid. Bryce Anderson's role is a question mark. As Damani Richardson departs, leaving a void at safety. But the versatility and being stout in the nickel with his run-stopping ability makes him really primed for that role. Jaden Hill, a guy who has great speed, played his best when inside for Florida. So some nice versatility and the ability to move players around here is what I'm seeing for A&M. DeRicky Wright was really good for Vanderbilt. Seems ideal fit at 217 pounds with the ability to fly to the ball with authority. Is also an exceptional tackler in space. You have some alternates like Trey Jones, started at Central Michigan the last 2 years. Dalton Brooks, a top 150 recruit as an athlete in last year's cycle, who got on the field, largely struggled. I really like the secondary, though, Nick. They remain stout under Fisher, likely can even be better this season. Although the struggles might occur with the corners early, I think overall this is a very good secondary, and you bring in Mike Elko, who really elevated the Duke secondary. I mean, they had ball hawks all over the place with lesser talent. The coaching is incredibly evident. I think this is going to be one of the top secondaries in America this upcoming season. Is that too lofty?
It's a little bit too lofty for me, but I think this is a secondary that has some high expectations and a high upside. Tyreek Chappelle, I like this guy. I think he's going to be a breakout player, one of the nation's best players in the secondary, in my opinion. He will form into that at left cornerback. I love Chappelle a lot. 21 total tackles, 7 pass breakups, and a pick for him. Bryce Anderson, 54 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups. Dalton Brooks, a really solid athlete, 18 total tackles and a pick for him last year. They add some solid players from different schools. DeRicky Wright from Vanderbilt's a very exciting player that I really want to see what he looks like at free safety. Very versatile player, moving around. This secondary unit has a lot of upside, a unit that can certainly be a solid unit. Again, they had 207 yards per game given up in the past, 37 in the nation. They could certainly get that number a little bit lower and get to closer to that 30th in the nation, in my opinion. With Elko coaching, this secondary has a lot of sky-high potential.
And obviously Elko's, the DBs, they're great at just filling gaps overall. Obviously a little bit of insight into his scheme. Obviously, third down split front. This is a mismatch for most teams. That's a nose and two wide nines with some outside linebackers alongside them, usually a gunner at inside linebacker. Plenty of speed in this alignment causes mismatches up front. I think you'll see that a good bit, especially to help offset some of the worries at linebacker. You're looking at the verdict for this defense. Talent and athletic ability remains as portal work matched with past recruiting. This defensive line is set up to do damage. They were good versus the run last year. Middle of the D outside of York, certainly concerns me. But this scheme won't cause that. The alternates will potentially struggle, but they're not going to be a massive liability, I don't think, by any means. I really like the secondary. And they've been hard to crack for the most part. And although tougher offenses really had no issues, and the CBs might struggle a bit early on, I really like some of the fits here for Elko's defense. This is going to be a greatly strong unit, I think, for A&M. That leads you to the prediction for the Aggies. On paper, this is a great team. It always has been, though. Winning close games and beating better teams was always a challenge for Jimbo. Other than Alabama, the last couple of years, he really seemed to have their number, including a major upset victory. He played them great in the past couple of tries. The Aggies have a great supporting cast led by a quarterback with tremendous upside. Offensive line should be better now that Adazio is out of the picture. Again, on defense, the D-line's deep, big, and physical. The potential of the secondary should certainly show. The issue is putting it all together on a weekly, consistent basis, and I think Elko's a home run hire. This was the correct one from the start. But the cohesiveness doesn't happen overnight, Nick, and I think that's the biggest question mark with Texas A&M, is being able to put it all together. And I think, they're going to knock off Notre Dame and Missouri in the first half of the year. They'll lose on the road to Florida, and I think they'll be upset at South Carolina, being another one of those blemishes. 8-4 for me. I think they have tremendous upside. Again, they always have. And I think you're going to see some of that, though. Some better cohesiveness, some nice balance, but fully recovered from the Jimbo era. Not quite is what you're seeing in my prediction.
I have 8-4 as my prediction as well. I think they're going to lose 2 games against Notre Dame and Missouri, flipping the 2 games against Florida and South Carolina that you picked. I agree they're going to lose to Texas and lose to LSU. Although that Texas game, keep your eye on that one, folks. Texas might get caught flat-footed in that first game in a rivalry that was dormant for the past 10-plus years after conference realignment. The last time these 2 teams played was also at Kyle Field, and Texas won it on a walk-off field goal. Definitely some bad blood in those A&M fans. They've been dying to get another shot at the Longhorns. They love that rivalry. They feel like Texas was dodging them, was a little scared. Now they're back in the same conference. We get that yearly. Look out for that one on November 30th. Maybe A&M gets an upset. I do like Notre Dame to win the game on week 1. That's a very exciting game. Potentially game of the week on week 1, depending on who you ask. I'm very excited to see what Notre Dame looks like this year. I think they will get a close win, but don't be surprised if A&M does win that game. I think this was the right hire with Mike Elko. A&M's always had talent, right? They got tons of money, perfect for the NIL, a great fan base, a really strong support, an incredible stadium, but they were just unable to get the right guys in. They were bringing in really talented players, but guys that had weak work ethics, guys that just didn't really gel together. Elko will certainly be able to kind of control it a little better as he worked with less talented players and got more out of them at Duke than Fisher did at Florida State. I think Elko is the right hire. I think it's going to be a good year 1. But A&M, they want to compete for national championships. 8-4 is not going to be competing for a national championship. How long until Elko gets this program to the level that the fans expect down there in College Station? Certainly will be interesting to see how this first year looks and how they react in December.
Mike Elko, a guy who certainly is going to show up every day to work, a guy who's heavily involved in the community, loves the community. Jimbo Fisher, I certainly think that he was there at times, and it seemed like he probably wanted to try, but with that large buyout looming, if I don't try, what am I losing? Absolutely nothing. I think that was kind of his attitude, maybe. Even though they played a lot of close games last year against great opponents, they just couldn't fully put it together. I think Elko is going to do a great job at A&M. This is going to be a big force, I think, moving forward in the SEC. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me, discussing the Aggies, a team that's probably not going to get talked about at all this offseason, so I think it was cool to take a dive into a team that's actually really good.
So people are certainly sleeping on this team. I think they have a really good setup here with the new coaching staff, a really solid roster that returns. I'm excited to see what the Aggies can do this year.
Just like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.